And the other thing is too, like Chuba Hubbard didn't do a poor job in replacement. As a matter of fact, he did a great job. So I would have to take less on the Christian McCaffrey line if he does play. What? Well, why is everyone laughing at me?
Is it
Chuba Hubbard? Did I do it wrong?
Chuba Hoobard?
Oh,
I
remember you corrected me. I remember you corrected me on the very first time, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get it right just for Nick," and then I did opposite day. Folks, it's MKF and Friday here on Monkey Knife Fight Live. We're joined by Nick Whalen to talk some NFL Sunday action and break it all down to you. Now, to the naked eye, it may look like Mr. Nick Whalen for the first time isn't wearing Jags gear here on Monkey Knife Fight Live, but he does have a surprise for us, quite literally under the sweater. I guess you could say up his sleeve. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Like you said, I am wearing a Jaguar shirt under this, rest assured. Kind of hard to see, but
flash the show.
Yeah. I wasn't really sure where Connor was going with that intro, but yeah, I mean, I'm so torn right now because it's like I obviously want to support the Jaguars, but at the same time, I don't feel like they deserve my support or anyone's support, having now lost 20 games in a row. If they find a way to lose this one in London on Sunday, I'm going to start worrying about the streak. I laid that out a couple of weeks ago after the Cincinnati loss. The schedule, I mean, there are some unwinnable games coming up for the Jags, and they're running out of winnable games before they would hit that magic number of, I believe, 27 for modern era consecutive losses. So this is a big one, bigger than normal when they play in London.
Well, I mean, they're back in London, and one thing to keep an eye on is that rookie quarterbacks in London are actually 0-5. So that's
awesome.
Does that give you any sort of confidence, or does that change anything in your mindset going in?
Well, the Jaguars are the team that has the rookie quarterback, so no, I already was not very confident. That does not dissuade me, but I don't know, man. I mean, the Dolphins have been a mess, right? I think we thought that they would look a little more competent, especially defensively, coming into this year, and they're they got beat up in every facet of the game against Tampa last week. They hung in a little bit early on, and then Tom Brady and that offense kind of put the pedal to the metal, and that one was over and kind of an embarrassment pretty quickly. So they're kind of coming in a little bit beaten down. Obviously, the Jags have been beaten down since week 2 of 2020, so there's no debate there. But I tell you what, I mean, I know we don't have a projection for Tua Tagovailoa, who it looks like is going to be starting this game, but I am not a Tua believer. I liked him in college. I was never a big believer that he should be, a first round NFL draft pick. I didn't like what I saw last year. I didn't like what I saw early this year before he got hurt. So I do think it is somewhat of an advantage for the Jags that Tua is starting this game, which says a lot about the state of the Miami Dolphins when I'm like relieved that Jacoby Brissett is not starting against the Jags.
Yeah, well, something to note too, you mentioned the Dolphins defense. I mean, they've lost their last 4 games by an average of 19 points. So Trevor Lawrence is going to write that touchdown ratio percentage or touchdown interception ratio that he has at 6-8. This could be the week to really get on it. I mean, Tom Brady threw for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns last week. Looking at the matchup, I'm going to have to take more on Trevor Lawrence, thinking about that. He's gone for more than this line at 240 yards. He's thrown for more than that twice this season. As I said, the Dolphins got absolutely ripped apart by Tom Brady. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence isn't Tom Brady, but 240 yards in London in front of a crowd that actually pulls in a lot of Jaguar fans because how often they play over there. So I'm really liking. I really like the more. Oh yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I'd go that far. I'd stop at probably one really, but I do like the more as well. I mean, you said he went over this number twice already, including last week against Tennessee in a game that was kind of a mess. Jags had some sloppy plays in that game as they want to do, but I thought Lawrence looked pretty good. Had another interception, but did throw a touchdown and, got to 273 yards, excuse me, on just 23 completions. So you would think against this Dolphins defense that is banged up, Xavier Howard's still questionable for this game. If he ultimately is unable to practice today and can't play on Sunday, that would be huge for Jacksonville. But I've maintained all along that for as big of a train wreck as this team is, I really do like what I've seen for the most part from Trevor Lawrence. He's had a couple of like really bad interceptions. I'm thinking of that horrific flea flicker interception against Arizona in week 3. But other than that, I actually think he's been pretty competent. And I think his good throws have been like, wow, okay, not many guys can really anticipate and make those type of throws. So overall, I'm encouraged. And like you said, I mean, if you look at the Dolphins passing defense this year, they've allowed 12 touchdowns and they have only 2 picks. So if there ever is an opportunity, to right that TD to interception ratio for Trevor Lawrence, I think today could be the day. The question for me is, can the Jags defense hold up? Because I think Jacksonville will be able to move the ball against Miami, but I also concern that Miami will be able to do the same to that horrific Jaguars defense.
Well, yeah, let's flip the script then and look at Myles Gaskin, because from what I'm seeing, there's possibilities. It sounds like now Tua is going to get that start, but there's still question marks around him that you alluded to. I'm with you on that read. I'm not sold on him as a QB1. I have no idea why they benched Ryan Fitzpatrick last season. Fitzmagic was doing his thing like he does when he plays for teams in Florida. But Myles Gaskin, focusing on this line, 37.5 yards with the question marks surrounding the quarterback situation in Miami. I have to go for more on that, especially against the Jaguars defense that has been susceptible to the run this season.
Yeah, it most certainly has. I mean, in terms of yards per attempt, the Jags have actually been okay. The thing is, teams are oftentimes leading them by multiple touchdowns and, are just kind of running to run out the clock. So it's a lot of anticipated running situations for this defense. I'm more worried about the Jags pass defense. But again, I also am not a Tua guy. So, these are kind of two competing forces. I see why you want to go more. This is a pretty low number, for a starting running back against a bad defense, 37.5 yards. But then you also look, I mean, the workload has been really inconsistent for Myles Gaskin these last couple of weeks. He has only 7 carries in the last 2 games. You would imagine that they would make more of a point to establish the run in this game. Weird environment, weird start time, bad opponent. But
quarterback questions.
Yeah, right. It's a second pick of the day. I don't want to go 2 for 2 to match you here. I'm going to trust this Jags run defense. Like I said, I'm more worried about the pass defense. I'll go less on 37.5 for Gaskin.
Well, I'm actually hoping with you that the streak is broken and that Trevor Lawrence can get the win on Sunday, and that there isn't an 0 for 6 and he gets his first win of the season and rookie quarterbacks don't go 0 for 6. And it would just be a nice little story for all you Jags fans. The question is, if you do get the win, what is the next step for Jags fans? Because if we get the loss, we know what it is. Now you're just looking forward to not go the 27 in a row. What is the next step if you do get the win come Sunday?
Man, yeah, I don't know exactly. Win the next one, I guess, right? I mean, I think at that point you start looking at, you start kind of schedule counting and say like, all right, what does it take for us to win the AFC South at this point? Because it's still available. Tennessee is not exactly taking this division and running with it. Houston looks terrible. I mean, Indianapolis looked very good for like 3.5 quarters against Baltimore the other night, and they blew that. Like suddenly if the Jags win this game, like everything is in play. And honestly, like, so if you look at the schedule, they're on bye next week, as they always are after London. You get that travel kind of benefit.
Seahawks.
And then you're at Seattle. And that Seattle game looked a lot more difficult a week ago than it does right now, because that's Geno Smith. So we're probably looking at an automatic win at Seattle on Halloween night. You're home for Buffalo on November 7th. To me, that's probably a toss-up game. Buffalo's looked, fine. Jags have looked okay. So I think at that point, you're probably riding a 3-game winning streak into that showdown with the Colts on November 14th.
Oh, man. Oh, I love the enthusiasm. I just want to remind you, though, that hope is probably the most dangerous drug in the history of mankind. Like hope will get you killed, folks.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, talk to me again after they lose like 38-3 on Sunday morning.
Hey, I actually, you know what? Looking at the matchup through and through, if they're going to get a win, I'm totally with you. It comes Sunday, and it's almost like we have to write the season. We have to do something. Let's get it done on Sunday morning.
I'm about to say this, but they have to have one of the easiest schedules remaining. They have the Jets. They have the Texans. They have the Seahawks without Russell Wilson. They have the Falcons at home.
Yeah, they get the Jets later on. I mean, just by virtue of playing in that division, like I feel like all 4. I saw the breakdown the other day. Like all 4 AFC South teams are in like the top 6 in easiest schedules, just because they all have to play each other.
Yeah, well, that's always encouraging. But hey, if you're a fan of the AFC South, it's definitely a very encouraging sign. But the AFC West is a bit of a cluster F, if you will. Kansas City is just losing left, right, and center this season. Justin Herbert is looking like a gunslinger, and I love matching these two guys up, especially after that game in Kansas City. I really think that there's a true rivalry being bored between the Mahomes faithful and the Herbert faithful, or the Herbert faithful, for all of our French Canadian listeners. So, but looking at Patrick Mahomes' line, he's gone for less than 300 yards in 3 consecutive games. Hasn't reached the 280-yard mark in those games. 316 yards is a big ask, but he's also taking on a Washington defense that, after last season, we're going into this year thinking, wow, Washington, let's get on them in fantasy. You know, that's a top 5, top 6 fantasy defense. Where have they been? Where is that defensive back situation? Where's the defensive back coach? What's going on there?
Yeah, this defense has been extremely disappointing. I think, you know, it starts with that defensive line is what everybody really fell in love with, right? You know, you have some big time draft capital invested in that defensive line that looks really good for most of last year. And I mean, even in week 1, like they played the Chargers week 1. I want to say they held LA to like 20 points in that game. And you're thinking, okay, that's a really good Chargers offense, you know, pretty successful outing for Washington. Ever since then, I mean, it's been disastrous. And I feel like they were kind of coasting on reputation for a little bit. And we're now 6 weeks into the season, and this is just not a good defense. You know, we talked about Miami on that pass defense. I mean, Washington has allowed 14 touchdowns and has only 2 takeaways through the air. So I think if you're looking for a big time bounce back opportunity for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, I think this is it. I'm going to go more on 316.5. I think this could be like a 370 and 4 touchdowns with a couple of those long rainbow all the way across the field bombs to Tyreek Hill.
Well, that you actually brought up one correlation that I wanted to make when it came back to me here, and it was that Washington game against Herbert, because you're right, they did only hold him to 20 points, pardon me, but Herbert still threw for 337 yards. They're just not stopping the pass this season. Patrick Mahomes has too many options. I'm doing the fanboy pick with the more on the Patrick Mahomes side, and then if you flip over the script to Justin Herbert, pardon me, I don't think he's passing for 296 against the Baltimore defense. That Baltimore defense in Baltimore is going to have to be engaged. I think they're going to mix it up. I think Austin Ekeler is going to be able to break some big passes and some screen passes. I think that's going to be a key to victory if the Chargers do pull that out, pardon me. But the big but being that Baltimore defense, they have a ferocious pass rush, and I'd like to see what a great pass rush does against Justin Herbert. Obviously, against Cleveland last week, he absolutely chewed them up and spit them out, going 2 yards shy of 400. But I think the Baltimore defense bounces back after what was a scary and possibly an embarrassing first 3 quarters that you said, that you alluded to off the top here, against the Indianapolis Colts on Monday night.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way on this. I think this game, I wouldn't be shocked if it resembles last week's Chargers-Browns game. Now, I don't know if both teams get into the 40s, and it's, I think the Chargers scored like 3 or 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter alone. And, you had multiple, guys catching it with nobody within 20 yards of them walking into the end zone. Like, I don't know that we get like major breakdowns like that. But this Baltimore defense is bottom 5 in the league in terms of pass yards allowed. They're way up there in terms of net yards per attempt. They're a good defense against the run. So I do think they'll have a good chance to slow down Austin Ekeler. But I think this is a game where, San Diego, I got to stop doing this with San Diego. The Chargers defense really, really struggles to stop the run. We know what the Ravens are really, really good at. That's running the ball. I think the Ravens are going to be able to put up points. And I think the Chargers are going to have to throw the ball to keep up in this one. So I actually really like Herbert to go over 295.5. I think these lines could almost be flipped. And I think I'd go more on both.
Yeah, well, there you go, folks. Nick Whalen's very own. I'm going to have to stick with the argument there. I just something at home. I think Baltimore's pride might be hurt a bit, and they might and the thing is, if you're going to get beat by the Chargers, and everybody knows this, it's going to be passing. So they do have that preparation coming in, and you know what? I see your game script. I respect it, but I think it could be a lot more of a smash mouth football game than what you are projecting there, Nick. But hey, that's why we do these shows, and that's why they're so much fun. Holy injury report. So, folks, just so you know, folks at home, if any one of those guys does not go, you will get your entry back for your tickets. So have no fear. You will not lose your money if one of those guys does not play. But looking through them, the only one I really have a question is in the middle there, Christian McCaffrey. Is McCaffrey going to go? Rotowire's Nick Whalen. Any inside scoop on Christian McCaffrey?
Well, I'm going to look at what we have on rotowire.com, and it looks like yesterday afternoon we got our last update. We should be getting one pretty much any time now for Friday's practice. But McCaffrey was a non-participant in practice on Thursday. That could be a bad sign. That could also mean they're just, being really careful. Obviously, with it being a hamstring, a muscle injury, I think he's going to continue to be listed as questionable. Could end up being a game time call. I will say though, not the greatest sign if you're not practicing on Thursday. So even if he is cleared, you got to wonder, is he going to be out there for 90% of the snaps like he normally is? Is he going to be, are they going to dump it down to him 10 times a game? I would be a little wary, in fantasy of what the workload looks like for McCaffrey if he's ultimately cleared for this game.
And the other thing is too, Chuba Hubbard didn't do a poor job in replacement. As a matter of fact, he did a great job. So I would have to take less on the Christian McCaffrey line if he does play. What? Well, why is everyone laughing at me?
Is it
Chuba Hubbard? Did I do it wrong?
Chuba Hoobard?
Oh,
I
remember you corrected me. I remember you corrected me on the very first time, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to get it right just for Nick." And then I did opposite day.
I like Chuba.
Hey, well,
Hoobard.
whatever.
I'm not sure if I heard that correctly, and then I heard a chuckle from our producer here.
Yeah, no. Well, there you go, folks.
Chuba Hoobard.
Put Chuba.
Sick.
Oh man, that's gonna be clipped. That's gonna be the intro of the show. Well, I'm embarrassed, folks. Take less on Christian McCaffrey because of Chuba. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I'm gonna go less on McCaffrey just because of the unknowns. If he practices in full Friday, looks great, and says I'm 100%, maybe you reverse course. But I think if for some reason you're locking in your picks right now, I don't know that you can confidently go more on a guy that might not even suit up.
Well, one guy that is set to suit up, and one guy that I'm pretty confident with my more on here is Jonathan Taylor. The Texans are allowing 154.2 rush yards per game since 2020, the most in the NFL. Not to mention that the Houston Texans as an organization are in shambles. I'm going to take more on Jonathan Taylor's rush line. Plus, he had a decent performance against a very tough Baltimore defense rushing defensive front last Monday night. So, Nick, where do you see Jonathan Taylor coming in?
Jonathan Taylor. I'm kind of in on him. I think you're on the right track here. A lot of the yards that he racked up though were technically pass yards, and we had that long dump off for the touchdown early on, and that led to 116 yards through the air. He only had 53 rushing yards on 15 attempts against that Baltimore defense. With that said, this is the Texans. Like you said, I mean, their defense has been in shambles. They had that weirdly competitive game against New England that maybe makes you think twice a little bit about how frisky this team can be. Obviously, they took it to the Jags in week 1, but I think we see this Colts defense kind of have its way with Davis Mills in this one, and I think the Colts offense, is able to capitalize probably on some short field situations. And, in a game that the Colts are probably leading throughout, I think we do see more Jonathan Taylor, and I do think he does get to at least 84 yards.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm completely with you on that one. And it's almost turning into our Monday show here on Monkey Knife Fight when we were talking about spoonerisms a few weeks ago. I just want to throw this one out there. Phil Wooler. There's a spoonerism. Now I'm moving on. Yeah, it's pretty good. Go Phil the Wooler. He's a wide receiver too. So fill his hands. Delvin Cook. He's been banged up the last few weeks. Madison's looked great in replacement for Delvin Cook up in the NFC North there. They get a tough matchup against the Carolina defense that's been stifling this season. 78.5 yards for a guy that's been banged up with question marks around him. I don't like it. I'm taking less on that one. Although if he's healthy, he's going to rip for 120. So it's really it's a coin toss on this one, but just based on the production I've seen from Madison, I don't see them having to rush Cook back in. Oh, man. I hope for Cook's sake and for fantasy owners of Cook that they play it slow this week so he's healthy for the longevity and for the sake of my pick. So I'm thinking the smart play. I'm taking the less because I hope for Cook's health and duration and career, they mix in Madison a little bit more this week. But he's also banged up too. So it's a double-edged sword this week, folks. It's a tough one.
Yeah. It's always tough when you're dealing with injured players. For what it's worth, he did practice in full on Thursday. Rotowire has removed the injury designation from Dalvin Cook's name. So it looks like he's going to be a go. But like you said, it doesn't mean he's just automatically back to 100% and 100% of his workload, especially when you're talking about a lower body injury, an ankle. So I would not be surprised if they take it easy with Cook, kind of split reps with Alexander Madison, who's looked just fine in Cook's stead. So, yeah, I kind of feel the same way about this one as I do McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey's status is probably a little bit dicier And obviously that's a pick that, if you're going to play this contest, you want to wait until probably Sunday morning to lock that one in. But yeah, I mean, this is also a good Carolina defense, right? I mean, I think that some of the luster has maybe been knocked off it these last couple of weeks, but I mean, they completely shut down Philadelphia for a lot of that game and really ended up shooting themselves in the foot to lose that one in week 5. So even like a fully healthy Dalvin Cook, this wouldn't be like a lock to go over 78.5. So yeah, with some of the injury concerns, I'll join you on the less there.
All right, let's go. We're cooking. Chef's in the kitchen. Darrell Henderson now, he's got a pretty good matchup against the Giants. A matchup which you would assume that the Rams would handle quite easily, get up on them, and then be handing the ball off. He's been battling injuries the last few weeks. You don't see the medical kit next to his name there on Monkey Knife Fight, however. But I was listening to something interesting out of New York earlier this week. One of the Giants podcasts taking on the Rams this week, and they're preparing for Sonny Michel in case Darren Henderson can't go. A lot of passes out of the backfield. Also, that's a hardcore podcast. But the question is, will Darrell Henderson be 100%? Will he be going? Because if he is, I have him over 78 yards. I have him for the more than 78.5 yards. Pardon me, pretty thoroughly. The question is he 100%? Rotowire, help me out.
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason why he won't be at 100% for this game. I know he's kind of been perpetually banged up, really throughout this entire season. But, he had that rib injury going into last week. We have no further injury updates on him on the site, which means he hasn't been listed on the report. He hasn't been limited at practice. So I think all indications are good there for Darrell Henderson. This is kind of a high number, 78.5 for a team that does like to use two backs, like you mentioned, Sony Michel. And a team that now is able to air it out, I think, more than it has in the past with Matthew Stafford and with that great stable of receivers plus Tyler Higbee. But yeah, I do like this. I think it's more about the matchup. I mean, not only are the Giants a bottom 5 defense against the run in terms of yards per attempt, but they're also extremely banged up. Like no team in the league right now has as many guys on IR listed as out for this week or questionable. I mean, for everybody is banged up for the Giants. It does sound like Daniel Jones is going to play. I think that's a plus as far as keeping this game a little more competitive, maybe forcing the Rams to, score more than they have to. But yeah, I mean, this defense is super, super banged up. Already not a good run defense. I think this sets up well for Henderson.
I'm a guy that's had. Sorry, Jason, but
go.
I gotta get in there. I'm a guy that's had 9 concussions. I had my sporting career end due to concussions. The fact that
9?
Daniel Jones, 9. Like my last one, man, I got in the September, and I couldn't walk again, read again, watch stuff again till that next April.
Hockey, Connor?
No, lacrosse, and that's actually why I got into sports casting. So that's what led me here today. So there's always a bright light at the end of the tunnel. But my point is, starting Daniel Jones this week is so irresponsible if he actually was concussed last week, especially against a Rams defense in a game. I'm sorry, Giants. And I'm sorry to you, Jason, as a Giants fan, you're not going to win your division this season. It's not going to happen. Save your quarterback's future. Save his brain. It's stupid and it's dumb and it's irresponsible. That's a hot take for you, but I'm all for health and protecting heads, as I'm very passionate about head injuries. Daniel Jones should not be playing this week.
I agree with you 100%, especially without Andrew Thomas, their starting left tackle. So your blind side is weak, and you got a guy who is throwing to 3.
Well, and you got Aaron Donald barreling in on him on every play. You got Leonard Floyd, who seems to have revigorated his career since getting out of Chicago.
It's a bad idea.
Oh. Yeah, anyway, so there's your Rowntree rant for this show, folks. But don't mess around with concussions, kids. And if you have any kids playing sports, folks, at home, take those injuries seriously because their careers could end just like mine. Now, a guy that is banged up, it says here, but I'd like him to have a big week, is Joe Mixon. Here's why. He's taking on Detroit. They're giving up 4.4 yards per carry this season, and they got absolutely rinsed, washed, and cleaned by the Green Bay Packers in the Rush game last week. I like more than 78.5 yards for Joe Mixon come Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like Samaje Perine going to miss this game. Mixon is banged up a little bit. They've been managing that ankle injury throughout the week, but he did practice on Friday. That's big. And they have one other option currently as an active tailback on this roster. So, whether Joe Mixon is fully healthy or not, whether that ankle holds up, they don't really have another option. So if they're going to be running the ball against a Detroit team that's very much vulnerable, really in all phases on defense, it's going to be Joe Mixon. So yeah, I do like this. Even if he's a little banged up, like I said, the lack of options behind him, I think means we might see Joe Mixon force fed a little bit.
Before we went on air yesterday, and I mentioned that Gio Bernard was in the backfield in Tampa Bay, would you think that he would have been the third back there in Cincinnati, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, right. I think I said it on the show yesterday. I had no idea that he was not like on a lifetime contract with the Bengals.
It's like Larry Fitzgerald. Someone asked me the other day, is Larry Fitzgerald still on the Arizona Cardinals? My immediate answer was yes. I had to call him up later and be like, no, I'm so sorry. He's not.
Right.
I felt like an idiot. But no, I totally understand
when in
the
doubt,
vibe.
just say yes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm a yes man. What can I say? Antonio Gibson. Should Daniel Jones start? Ian, no. Antonio Gibson time now, 70.5 yards. A bit more of a tough matchup here. I'm going to have to go for less on his line, Nick. I'd like to pick your brain on this one.
This one's tough because, it's just a terrible Kansas City defense. Although it's a defense that I trust less against the pass, I guess, than I do against the run. And, Antonio Gibson has been held under this number in now 4 straight games against the Giants, the Bills, the Falcons, and the Saints. Kind of a mixed bag in terms of how you value those defenses. And I think this is a game, like I said at the top, I think Mahomes and the Chiefs get back on track offensively. So I don't think this is a game where Washington is necessarily pounding the run, especially in the second half. So I don't know that Antonio Gibson gets to like 20 carries in this game. So I'm going to go less.
Yeah, I'm with you on the less there. As I said, it's not so much a tough matchup in the run game. I meant as a tough matchup to read based on how Kansas City will they score and what's going on in Kansas City realistically. I mean, they're dropping games left, right, and center. This is a game that they must have to get their season back on track. I like them to make a statement, and I don't see Gibson getting much going on the ground because of that. Lamar Jackson now. You alluded to it before. We've already touched on Ekeler and Jackson in this one, but we're talking rushing yards with Lamar Jackson here. He needs 68.5, so 69 rushing yards. Cue Rob Gronkowski. Spike, he'd love that number. Should get Gronk in on his prediction here. Will Lamar get 69 yards on the ground? I'm going to say no because of the fact I think that they're going to rush the ball with their running backs, get Lamar out. I do think you'll have right around 50 yards. If that line was around 50 yards, I think I'd be enticed for the more. But 68.5 yards, 69 yards is a lot from a quarterback out of the pocket, especially when we've seen his development as a passer this season. Nick, what do you think on that one?
I feel like we're being baited here because Lamar hasn't gone over this total since week 2. He had 2 huge rushing games to begin the year, but the Chargers rushing defense is by far the worst in the NFL. So, it's like everything is aligning, I think, for him to have a huge game. But part of me thinks like, it's not like the Chargers don't know this. Like, they are obviously aware that they're a terrible rushing defense. They're obviously aware that they're going up against the greatest rushing quarterback of all time. So even though the numbers imply that Lamar should run all over them, like my thought is that they're aware of their weaknesses and you're preparing all week to say like, we cannot let this guy run all over us. So part of me thinks that they'll be so prepared to stop Lamar that, maybe they end up getting exposed in the passing game because you're focusing so much, on keeping him in the pocket. But I got to follow the numbers here. I'm gonna go on the opposite side of you and say that Lamar gets his first 70-yard rushing game since week 2.
Yeah, well, it's as you said, it's completely doable in the matchup. But as I alluded to earlier, I forget what the matchup was. It's just when the team's preparing for one thing, it's so hard to take that away. But then again, you said it, Lamar Jackson, he's right up there with Michael Vick as the best rushing quarterback of all time. Even if you have a guy QB spying him, he'll beat you to the boundary and turn it upfield. So Lamar Jackson's always a threat, but at just 69 yards is a lot on the ground. I'm going to have to take the less. Austin Ekeler now taking on a great Baltimore defense. I think he's going to get a lot of yards through the air. I think that's going to be the bread and butter. I said that when we were talking about Justin Herbert. I think it's going to be the swing passes, the screen passes, but there are a few teams better than stuffing the run up the middle than the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, this one's really tough. I think he's going to come in right around this number. I mean, I'm really high on Browns defense, and we saw Ekeler get to 66 yards on 17 carries in that game. I think the Ravens probably present a similar challenge, maybe not quite as dynamic as that Cleveland defense, especially with the edge rushers that Cleveland has. So, I think we'll go opposite on this one too. I'm going to go more. I think he gets to like 62, 63, 64 yards, somewhere in that range. I don't think this is like a 100-yard day for Austin Ekeler, but I think the Chargers are committed enough to being diverse, getting that running game going alongside their outstanding passing game, that we see Ekeler get enough carries to get into the mid-60s here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a smash mouth game. I can see Austin Ekeler getting right around 60, but For some reason, my gut is telling me to go with the less. There you go, folks. Full analysis for your banged up 8x8 this week. Scroll down, hit submit. You're in to win on that one. Shifting gears now to the late slates. And you just mentioned this team. It's the Cleveland Browns. They're hosting my sleeper team to win the Super Bowl going into the season, the Arizona Cardinals. And yes, I'm flexing that pretty heavy right now as they are ramping up here. So let's just get in here really quick. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, they both looked great this season in points, and they both made some bonehead mistakes passing the football. I think this is going to be a smash mouth game. I have more and more for both of them.
I think you're on the right track. I think this is going to be a really fun game. The Arizona offense, I think, was a little disappointing last week against San Francisco. I don't think anybody expected them to be shut down the way they were, especially with San Francisco, not really being able to move the ball with Trey Lance. So I think this is a bounce back opportunity for Arizona. And obviously this Cleveland offense can score with the best of them. Cleveland's going to be without Nick Chubb. That was just announced about 10 minutes ago. Obviously you have a more than capable number 2 in Kareem Hunt, but without Nick Chubb, maybe we see them lean a little more heavily on that passing game. So I think you're on the right track here, Connor. I'll join you on the more and more.
Yeah, I love that. And there's something from the background here from our producer, Julie Ertz's husband, aka Zach Ertz, was traded to the Cardinals a little after we went on air, folks. So that happened. And then obviously Nick Whalen dropping that Rotowire genius on us with the fact that Nick Chubb won't be playing. So make sure you don't put any money down on Chubb's line if he's still available on Monkey Knife Fight.
Yeah, go less on Chubb.
Definitely hit less on Chubb, although you'll get your money back. So even if you hit more, it doesn't matter. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, they have an awesome matchup here in the later afternoon. How do you see the Cowboys rolling here, Nick?
I mean, New England's been really tough to get a read on, right? Where, some weeks it looks like they're like a bottom 7 team in the league. Other weeks it looks like they are kind of a classic New England team where they can slow it down, they can control the ball, they can pick up first downs, and they can play with anybody like they did against Tampa Bay. But I'm just starting to lean more and more toward the former, where it's like you're barely scraping by the Houston Texans. Like that's a red flag to me. Like when there's such a coaching mismatch and a roster mismatch and you're trailing for most of that game, that signals to me that like the Patriots did everything they could and barely beat the Houston Texans. So I'm leaning toward the Patriots not being a very good team. At the same time, would it be shocking if New England hung in with this high-flying Dallas offense? Probably not, just because it's New England. But I'm trying to be more and more objective as I evaluate this game and not just give the Patriots kind of the automatic bump that they've been getting for the last 20 years because they're New England Patriots. It's a lot of the same process you go through when you evaluate the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, where it's like you're automatically inclined to think oh, they have Greg Popovich, that's +7 wins. That might not necessarily be true anymore. And I'm kind of starting to get those same feelings about New England. So honestly, I mean, Dallas has shown no reason to believe that this offense will slow down, right? I mean, they're scoring with ease week in and week out. It hasn't really mattered who the opponent is. So I think they do the same. I think they go into New England and this is a big time statement win and kind of a, legitimate Super Bowl contender status type of win for Dallas.
Yeah, almost like a changing of the guard, because when you talk about the National Football League, right, a couple teams that really come up are the Dallas Cowboys and the New England Patriots. And the New England Patriots have no doubt been the top dog in the National Football League for the better part of 20 years. And there's no secret that the wheels are falling off if you just watch their games week to week. You saw it last week, Mac Jones making boneheaded passes that were intercepted. Just flea flickers, flea flickers on the other team getting by your defense and blowing by Daryl McCourty. Like, you can't have that happen on an A1 defense that Bill Belichick is supposed to bring to the field week in and week out. I'm with you 100%. I think the Cowboys trounce the New England Patriots in New England this week, and I have more on Dak Prescott's line. I think Zeke is going to run all over them, so Jason can pull up those numbers. Dak, I just think he's going to go for more than he was 279. So the people on Monkey Knife Fight are agreeing with us, Nick. So I like the more and more from both of these guys. We touched on the Cleveland matchup before. And then basically anybody with a star on their jersey come Sunday, I like on Monkey Knife Fight.
Yeah, no, same here. I mean, the Patriots run defense has been respectable. I mean, it's one of the top 10 units in the league in terms of yards per attempt. But I mean, Ezekiel Elliott looks as good as he's looked since 2018 at
Resurgence.
This point. Yeah, I mean, back-to-back 100-yard games, back-to-back 20 carry games. They're hitting big plays through the air. I think it continues. At some point they're going to get tripped up or have a down game, but I think they're rolling on all accounts. Like, everybody seems confident. Everybody seems like they're at the top of their game. And like you said, I think this is kind of a chance to topple a team that has ruled the NFL for the last couple of decades. And, like I said, is a statement game for the Cowboys.
Well, here's an interesting one, though, is Amari Cooper's line at 5.5 receptions. I think this could be a big comeback game for him against a New England secondary that should be good, but we've seen get exploited, especially last week. Now, he had 6 targets, 3 grabs last week. That looks great. He had 17 targets in week 1. Since then, his highest target share was 6 last week, and then we have a 5, a 4, and a 3. I'm going with the more than 5.5 receptions. I think he gets 6. I think this is a great opportunity to get Amari Cooper back on track. And he's clearly been involved in the offense with over 60 yards receiving in the last 2 weeks with touchdowns in each of those performances. So while the statistics and the recency bias may be going less on Amari Cooper, I'm going more. As I said, I like this to be a statement game for the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, Cooper, it feels like he's playing well, but he has exactly 3 catches in now 4 straight games. So you kind of wonder, are there like too many weapons in Dallas? Like CeeDee Lamb, obviously is there. Like Michael Gallup has kind of disappeared as like a 5th option, and he's a really good 5th option if that's how he's being used. The tight ends have been more involved recently. Cedric Wilson's been more involved. So it's kind of tough to trust a guy like Amari Cooper. I think is a premier receiver, but when you have so many other options, like, this is kind of the anti-Rodgers Devontae Adams, where it's like, if there's a big play or you need to pick up 12 yards for a first down, exactly where the ball's going. Dak has so many options that he hasn't really had to force it to Amari Cooper. So, I mean, obviously he's not just going to have 3 catches every game the rest of the way. At some point, it's going to start to look a little bit more like week 1, where I think he had 13 catches against that Tampa Bay defense. But I'm going to go the opposite here. I'm going to take less. I think this New England team can still control the game defensively. They're still very good at limiting scores in the red zone, forcing you to have these kind of longer drawn out drives. They're top 5 in the league in terms of defensive score percentage. So even though that defense has looked vulnerable, on the whole, it's been pretty good. Like I said, I like Dallas to win the game. I think it's going to take a more balanced effort, though. I think they stay committed to the ground game, and I don't think this is like a massive, 45 plus pass attempt game for Prescott.
Well, I mean, one thing to note too, right? Just from a scoring perspective, Dallas has put up 80 points across the last 2 games. And I'm like, this is going to be a real test for the New England Patriots. And I can't stress that enough. But let's shift over to DeAndre Hopkins, one of the elite receivers in the NFL. For my dollar right now, probably the best receiver in the NFL skill-wise, on top of everything when it comes to speed, catching, breakaway separation, and strength, and hand strength for that matter, getting the ball. I like him to go more on this line. Cleveland, they're gonna need to pass the ball. He had 87 receiving yards last week with a touchdown. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. I think they're gonna need him to be a number 1 guy on those 3rd down situations, like Mr. Nick Whalen just said when talking about the Cowboys. So I'm taking more on DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, same here. I think this is a potential bounce back for this Arizona passing game. As much as I like the Cleveland defense and respect the Cleveland defense, I mean, Kyler Murray is almost in that Lamar Jackson zone where it's just so hard to get him down. And when you have a guy that can kind of breach, those outside contains on either side, it causes you to scramble. And Cleveland's defensive backfield is still super banged up. Looking at Rotowire right now, they have 4 cornerbacks currently listed as questionable for this game. Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, AJ Green, and Greg Newsome, all questionable for this one. Cleveland's super banged up. They're kind of in that same territory at this point as the Giants. We'll see how many of those guys end up playing. But yeah, going up against DeAndre Hopkins with like 2nd and 3rd cornerbacks, not ideal.
Yeah, no, I'd at least like to have Greedy Williams on him because I think that kid's actually really good from what I saw in college.